Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 AP English, the World of Ideas lectures, and our introductory comments to Plato's Republic. Now, we have worked with Republic books 1 through 7. We have just finished with the cave allegory, and now we're going to finish our conversation with Republic. Now, again, just to remind, I have detailed lectures of all of the books of Republic on Learn Strong in the AP and World of Ideas folder. I'm giving you just a summary, a real quick summary of the major events of Republic. Such an important text in the history of our Western thought. And I think, as I showed you at the end of our Republic 7 lecture, such an important text in regards to just fundamental wisdom and views of the world. Now, whether you agree or not with it is entirely up to you. And we're going to reach some more controversial ideas here, starting in Republic Book 8. Let's go there now quickly. To understand this notion, we have to go back to that little diagram. I'm not going to put it on my whiteboard other than to just say, do you remember when we played around with this idea that all groups have these three parts of a beginning, a middle, and then an end? Call it A, the beginning of the group, B, the ascension of the group, and C, and now for our study of Book 8 and Book 9 of Republic, the decline or the declension of the group. What Plato suggests is so important in the history of political science is that groups have a tendency to, after they begin, ascend and then to descend, to fall. You can already think about Edward Gibbon's The Declining Fall of the Roman Empire, the 1776 volume, as being an exemplar of what we're speaking of. Why is it in your sophomore year or whenever you had your world histories class, why is it that a unit would end with a certain civilization, the Greeks, and then all of a sudden it was the Romans to follow? Well, this notion of the decline of a group or a republic is now where Plato is going. There's an argument that at the end of Republic 7 it was done, and then Plato just wanted to keep going because he had other ideas, and certainly these are significant ideas as well. There is a personal reading of Book 8 and a political reading of Book 8, so I want that in your notes for both of those. If the ideal state is the oligarchic or the aristocratic state, as exemplified in this notion of the philosopher king, again, from Book 7, the philosopher king is the one who has been educated to know what is real, then there could be a declension or a falling. That will be both for the group as well as for the individual. If the individual is properly balanced, we would call that an aristocratic kind of notion of the just individual, and then there could be some kind of falling off. Let's go through it quickly. It's a 4-stage project. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because I do that elsewhere in another lecture on learnstrong.net. First, there is the falling away to timocracy. The timocratic state is like Sparta. It has military as its primary rulers, and honor is the chief interest here, okay? So that's what we mean when we talk about a timocracy, okay? Now there is as well the timocratic individual. The timocratic individual is the one who is going to be spirited, emotional, very interested in honor and reputation, as opposed to the aristocratic just individual. The next falling away politically is the oligarchic state, where wealth takes over. We have the rich versus the poor class, and the rich class becomes increasingly more lazy. Of course, the oligarchic individual is an individual that desires wealth. From here, we then move to Plato's critique, and it is a harsh one, of democracy. Now, before we all roll our eyes, get up and walk out of 303, let's pay attention to what we mean by the critique of democracy. For Socrates, or I should say first, for Plato, democracy is what led to the execution of Socrates. So for Plato, he has serious problems with a democracy, as he understood democracy especially, and here's why. Democracy, like the one that was in Athens of Plato's day, is ultimately a state with increasingly less and less discipline. Everyone has freedom to do whatever everyone wants to do, and because people are often uneducated and perform poorly in their behavior patterns, they will in fact use their license for bad or terrible reasons. But the other reason why Socrates has problems with a democratic state and democracy is that it can lead to, because oligarchy again is what has just transpired in the longing for wealth and a rich and a poor class, that there's a growing poor class of individuals, and Socrates will argue that a democratic state will become a debtor state. It's an interesting idea. The democratic individual is, of course, for Socrates, not a good individual. It's a person whose pleasure for the moment and no real restraint ever will lead to his or her downfall. Okay? So that's the way the use of the word democracy is understood in Plato here. Finally, after democracy, there is the tyrannical state, which is the worst imaginable state. And this one usually culminates in some idea of civil war. You have all kinds of civil unrest because in a democracy, Socrates says, everybody wants their say. Everybody wants to do whatever they want to do. There's no license. There's no restraint. There's only license. And because of that, then ultimately we're going to have a civil war. Out of this will arise the tyrannical leader, who is a great demagogue, a great speaker, and a great promiser of all things, and yet in the end will only lead to higher taxes and ultimately, again, the implosion of the state. The tyrannical individual is the individual that is driven by lust, has no friends because nobody can actually trust him or her. That's Book 8. Book 9. It's interesting because we turn in Book 9 to Scooby Snacks, as we call them in 303, happiness. And as we've always said, Scooby Snacks are an illusion, and now we're maybe ready to give a Platonist spin on why it is that we say that. What's going on with this idea that Scooby Snacks are an illusion? And the answer works something like this. Socrates will say there are actually three kinds of happy. So when Jefferson said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, which is an interesting thing that the word happiness, Scooby Snacks, gets into the Declaration of Independence twice, right? What is up with that? Socrates says there's actually three kinds of happiness. First of all, if you think about it in the form again of a triangle, and if I was putting this on the whiteboard, I won't, but if I was putting this on the whiteboard, I would put it again in the form of a triangle. Remember, Plato is the great mathematician. Let him who is without mathematic ability enter not here, who is above his academy door. And to that degree, he's going to use his geometric forms, right, following Euclid. That is to say, the triangle. And if you put it there, there's actually three kinds of happiness. And at the very bottom of that triangle are the happiness that are derived as pleasures of gain and satisfaction. Okay? That is to say, as much stuff as I can get. Above that, there is the pleasures of success and good reputation. People think well of you. That's a good happiness. But above that, there are the pleasures of knowledge and wisdom. Right? Now here's the interesting thing that he says about the truly just individual. He says the just or the wise individual knows the pleasures of gain and satisfaction, no question, but also knows the pleasures of success, and finally also knows the pleasures of knowledge and wisdom, and to that degree is far more happier. In other words, a person who only understands happy as I get what I want, I could care less about you, that individual can't really relate to an individual who considers himself or herself happy because, yeah, I've already done that. I've already, back to the myth of Maverick view, I've already picked up the money and I know it was meaningless. It didn't mean anything to me. Or, for example, the pleasures of reputation and success, if you've had those. But if you've got that third level, that highest level of happiness, to that degree then, that's a far more really happy person. And the just individual then is able to respect all three forms of happy taken collectively. Finally, Book 10 of Republic is a critique of the arts and a myth about afterlife. I'm not going to say hardly anything about this because I've talked about it in other lectures online at Learn Strong, and you can go and take a look at it. But I will say two things. First of all, his critique of the arts. Socrates points out that if education matters, then you might want to pay attention to what the stories are you're exposed to. There's a great line from Cormac McCarthy's The Road that a number of you have read and you appreciate. You'll remember the father tells the son, be careful what you put in your mind, because once it's there, it's never going away. And Socrates, it's a very Socratic idea. Socrates says the same thing. You got to pay attention to the arts, to the stories that we tell, because we are the stories that we tell and retell. We're also the stories we, accept and reject, no question, right? That is true. We said that often. But rejecting a story that you've been told all your life or you've heard all your life, that is a hard thing to do. And so to that degree, we've got to pay attention to the stories we expose ourselves to. I've said it before. If I want to know something about you, I just got to look at the lyrics of the songs on your playlist. Some of you will say, ooh, I don't know if that's really what you want to see me represented as and with. Well, Socrates says it's too late. You know all those songs' lyrics in your mind. That is to say, you might want to pay attention. And when you become a parent, clearly you want to pay attention. What are you exposing your children to in terms of the arts? The second comment that I'll make in conclusion is that Plato does something really fascinating, and he tells a myth about a man named Ino who has a near-death experience. He dies and then he comes back to life. And he tells about what it's like in the afterlife. And ironically, Plato, through Socrates, he will tell about the Scooby Snack rewards that are a part of afterlife, or obviously some kinds of punishments. You have some really fascinating kinds of ideas there. Only this comment now, because we're, again, just giving surface level information. Again, I've already given a full lecture on this. It is interesting to ask if you in fact are here, and you in fact are a body and a soul, mind, spirit, consciousness, energy, whatever word you want to use, then what happens when you die? That is a very interesting question. And as I've said in other lectures, there's typically three answers to this question. One is a non-answer. You're nothing. You're like Rover. You're dead all over when you die. But it's not really an answer. The other two answers in the history of the world, generally speaking, have been either a linear answer, you live, you die, and then there's some kind of reward punishment afterwards, or a cyclical answer, you live, you die, and then you come back and you return, you do it all over again, you reincarnate. Go back to our lectures on Learn Strong with W.B. Yeats, and I talk more at length about this because Yeats spent a lot of time thinking about the stories that played that game. Well, there you go. The famous line from Republic 10, line 617, the responsibility is with the chooser. God is justified. And I think what Plato was actually saying is, I've done the best I could to try to present some ideas to you. Now it's your turn to decide how many of those ideas you want to actually hold on to. As an instructor for you guys, I would say the same thing. I hope that our study of Plato, at least at this level introductory, will lead you to want to sit and pick up and actually read the Republic. Now, in World of Ideas, you're going to turn to an actual reading, the Jowett translation, of Republic 7. Hurrah! So we get to go back now that you know what Republic 7 is about, and go to work with it. I hope that it will be of interest to you. Thank you.